What's going on, everybody? It is Tuesday. It is time for that EFIN morning show. We're going to wrap up week 12. It was a long one. We got extra days. We're going to do it with Adam Hulse, who is here, as you see, via phone, like always. Let's get after it, boys. Let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to that EFIN morning after show. It is time to wrap up week 12. I hope everyone had a fantastic too, Thanksgiving. Adam, how was your holiday? And welcome to the show.
It was great. It was an interesting week scheduling wise, right? Like a first ever afternoon Black Friday game, the Thursday triple header on Thanksgiving. So from a scheduling standpoint, this week was surely unique.
Unfortunately, all these extra games were not fantastic. Fortunately and unfortunately,
No.
you weren't like glued to the television. You didn't have to sit there and watch it. It was nice as background noise, but nothing truly exciting. The most excitement we had was that Green Bay Detroit game, and then it just kind of tapered down. And that Black Friday game did not bring the fireworks. It was originally scheduled. We talked about this last week. This was supposed to be Rodgers and Tua, not the disaster that happened. But you got fireworks if you were a Dolphins fan, and if you like stat lines, that was okay.
I mean, let's be honest. That Friday game was awful. It was almost unwatchable, that game. And then the two blowouts on Thanksgiving, kind of like you referenced. And then just to cap off this week, we had maybe the worst game of the season on Monday Night Football. That game was just absolutely terrible on every level.
We are going to get into that, but yes, that game should have just stopped it. They should have said, You know what, never mind. Like, at least taking it off there. And you can't stop the game. You just be like, we're going to show something else. We're going to show something a little more exciting. We've got a paint dry channel over here.
Yeah.
We've got an aquarium channel so you can watch some
You're
fish swim around, something like that, because last night was an absolute disaster.
It takes a lot for me to lose interest in a football game, and I completely lost interest in that game.
100%. I wasn't even watching it. I was just checking it on my phone, and I lost interest in checking it on my phone. David, welcome to the show. He's up. Steelers, baby. That's right. That's why he's up. He's been up since that win. We're coming. I told you, double-digit wins. The double-digit wins.
Yeah, favorable schedule too. Favorable schedule for the Steelers.
How do we know it's going to be double-digit wins? Because we went through every single team week by week, game by game. We predicted how the season was going to turn out. And honestly, we're not doing so bad. Let's take a look at it. We went through, predicted every single team, how they're going to finish, kind of ruined the season for you. Right now, I am sitting at 114-66. My friend Adam here is just ahead of me at 115-64. It wasn't Adam's best week. Adam went 7-9. I think this is your first losing record week, though.
It is.
And I happen to pull out a 10-6 thanks to last night's disastrous game. The visiting team went 9-7 this week. It's been a while since the visiting teams have led in the win category. There are 24 passing touchdowns this week, 22 rushing touchdowns this week, 1 defensive touchdown this week, and 78-101 for visiting teams. Home teams up 101-78. So home teams starting really to pull away with this dominance. And all the games weren't sleepers. How do you feel? Again, we predicted this before the season started. So Rodgers wasn't going to be there. We didn't see Mandrews going down. We didn't see Burrow going down. All this stuff. This is your worst week so far. How does it feel to be on the losing side this time? Because it's been a while. I don't think you've actually had a losing record at all this entire season.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. We're up to week 13 right now, and if my worst week is 7-9, I'm pretty happy with how I'm doing right now.
115-64 on the season is not a bad spot to be, predicting this before the season ever started.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable how both of our records look right now, considering all of those unknown variables.
Speaking of records, there were games this weekend. Let's talk about how they went down in our Week 12 rewind. Week 12 rewind brought to you this week. We're going to switch it up. We're going to bet it by Waiver Wire, TSS Fantasy Waiver Wire. It's on tonight. It's on every Tuesday night. going to give you waiver picks, head over to Fantasy Sports Corporation. Check them out. They got the little Thanksgiving promo there tonight on Fantasy Sports Corporation channel and find out all your waiver wire picks. I'm sure we'll discuss some of those as well, but let's get into it. We talked about the Thanksgiving games. Nothing fantastic there. We did get some good stat lines. Jared Goff going for 332. Amon-Ra St. Brown gets you 95, but doesn't get you the touchdowns. Really, in this Green Bay Detroit game, excuse me as I get ahead of myself, it was the quarterback show. It was Goff and Love, both who make the fantasy top 10 this week. Love with 3 touchdowns through the air. Fantastic. Goff got you another 2. Goff doing well for you. Monty comes through. He gets his 71 for a touchdown, finds himself in the end zone, and Watson actually finds himself in the end zone. This was the most exciting game of the Thanksgiving Black Friday experiment, or well, I guess Thanksgiving tradition with the Black Friday experiment.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And like, not even close, right? Like, this was definitely the most exciting game of those 4 that we're talking about right now. From a fantasy perspective, a breakout game for Christian Watson that I know a lot of managers have been waiting for that to happen. Yep. He's been one of those guys where, like, last year he was so good, and like the times he played, he's always hurt. This year hasn't been so much. It was good to kind of see him bounce back a little bit. And then when it comes to the Lions, I think they've shown that, Gibbs and Monty can both coexist, and they can both be RB1s on fantasy rosters. There's enough carries to go around and production to go around to both of them that when Monty came back, a lot of people were worried about what would happen to Gibbs. And in the beginning of the year, it was all Monty and no Gibbs. But I think the Lions have kind of figured out how to use both of them at this point.
I want to say what's up to Jerry. And yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. I think that having both of them, I mean, I don't know if you play them both, if you had both players on your roster, I don't know why you do that, but if you have one of them, you can 100% play them because they do the what you're supposed to do. You got one running guy and you got one catching guy, and they actually use them like that. And it pays off. They get yards. We talk about the lack of defense in that division and so on and so forth. Backtrack real quick. David said he had to watch the whole Monday Night Football game, needed DJ Moore to get less than 18.48. Depending if he played PPR or not, he was disappointed as DJ Moore in PPR comes up over 22. We'll talk about that when we hit our top 10, when we get you guys statted up in just a few minutes. We move on to the next game. It was the Dallas game. This was exciting for you because Dallas completely dominated this game. It was 100% one-sided. We got to see some points from Sam Howell. Sam Howell gets you the 300 yards. He does end up again on the top 10 list. Sam Howell destroying the top 10 every week. I want to say he's like 4 in a row. He's 5 in a row now in the top 10. It's crazy what Sam Howell's doing. I'm going to blow your mind when I get into the quarterback stats in just a few minutes when we get you guys statted up with Sam Howell. I'm going to blow your mind. You're not going to believe it. But I digress. Prescott, 4 touchdowns, 331. This was really the fantasy bonanza, even though, you got the Sam Howell. Curtis Samuel gets 9 for 100, so that's 19 for you. And then, like we talked about, like everybody on the Cowboys got you something.
Yeah, my Cowboys definitely showed up. They turned it on, especially later in the game, which has kind of been a theme for the Cowboys this year. And a lot of their bigger wins, like the game might be a little bit close for the first half, first few quarters. But again, when they what I see with the Cowboys is when they finally put their opponents in those must-pass type situations and get the team trailing a little bit and chasing, that's when their defense is so dangerous. In those predictable type of downs, when the offense is chasing, when they can really just get after the quarterback and create turnovers, the 2 things that they're really good at. And that's why some of these blowouts have looked the way that they did, because late in games, instead of the other team trying to play catch-up, while they're trying to play catch-up, it results in the Cowboys pulling away even further because they're getting the interceptions and the sacks.
It's crazy, and that defense is insane. Got to welcome Josh Bandy over at 4th and Flex. Go check those guys out. 4th and Flex. Check out the channel. Check out all the stuff. They throw out so much stuff. We love Bandy over there at Fourth and Flex. Said Sam Howell's killing it. He called it last year, and says the Cowboys are scary. They're 100% scary. In honor of Bandy, I'm going to go ahead and break out the Sam Howell stat now. Just the Sam Howell stuff. I'm not going to get you all statted up just yet, but I am going to break out the Sam Howell stat and get you guys a little statted up. I'm giving away the answer here, but do you know who leads the entire NFL? The entire NFL in completions, in yards, also in interceptions and sacks. It's all Sam Howell. Sam Howell's been absolutely beat the hell up. He's thrown the same amount of interceptions as Josh Allen. Still leads in completions. Still leads in yards. Does not lead and win. Sam Howell is fantasy monster for the season.
Yeah, I mean, he's been, one of the fantasy MVPs this year, right? With like his preseason value to what he's become. And look, he's the perfect product of, something we talked about in the offseason, and it's garbage time, right? Like, he's not a bad quarterback. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback either. When you watch his decision making and the interceptions and some of the things he does, but he is a fantasy dream in that the Commanders are always playing from behind. Eric Bieniemy runs a very good passing system with that team, and Howell is good enough to beat defenses with some of his passing as well. So it's a mediocre quarterback, favorable system, trailing all the time in garbage time, and it's been a recipe for, as you keep saying, Sam Howell lives in the top 10.
18 passing touchdowns this year. That puts him tied up there in the he's number 6. He's tied for 6 for passing touchdowns. And he's got himself 3 rushing tutties as well, so which isn't bad either. I mean, the guy statistically is getting it done. That's tied for second. He's tied for 3rd in rushing touchdowns. It's absolutely ridiculous. I got to scroll my screen. He's tied for 5th in rushing touchdowns. Let me make sure I'm accurate. I want to give you guys bad information. It's still insane, is what it is. To have 21 touchdowns in the year, lead in completions and yardage as Sam Howell. That's just. Like I said, to me, I don't know. Maybe I sold it too much. Blows my mind. San Francisco and
Sam Howell for sure is candidate for fantasy MVP. But before we move on from my Cowboys, let me just say it: Dak Prescott is really making his case right now to potentially be the MVP of this season. Like, look, I know Jalen Hurts is the front runner right now, and deservedly so, with where he has the Eagles and how he's been playing. But if for whatever reason, if Jalen Hurts falters and it's his award to lose, if he's not the one to win it, it really might be Dak Prescott.
He's definitely making the case. Josh says, Bandy says we're killing it. Thank you, Bandy. You guys kill it every week, flexing out over there on Fourth and Flex. Make sure you check those guys out. Prescott is putting up the numbers. We're going to get into that when I do go over at the actual, get you guys really statted up in the quarterback category. We'll talk about who's leading, but Prescott is there. And we'll talk about another dark horse candidate that people has been getting a lot of bad press lately, but you cannot deny the numbers sitting at the top. He's on the cover of Madden, just to give you a hint. San Francisco played Seattle on Thanksgiving Day as well. This one, San Francisco completely dominated. We see that regression from Geno. If you had San Francisco players, you definitely got some stats. CMC finishing in the top 10, once again up there towards the top. Yet another appearance, leads the league in top 10 appearances this year. And, stat-wise, we saw JSN get a little bit involved, but Seattle just didn't have anything for San Francisco. San Francisco dominated this game.
I mean, San Francisco dominated. The Niners winning, not necessarily surprising. After that little 3-game losing streak by the 49ers, they look like themselves again. They're dominating a lot of teams. I think, for me, the story to come out of this one is it's time to be concerned about the Seahawks. They have not looked very good over, pretty much this entire season, with the exception of like a couple of games. This was a team we were both very high on coming into this year. They have not looked the part. They're going to make the playoffs, in my opinion, just because the NFC is relatively weak. But as bad as the Vikings are, they might be still making the playoffs in the NFC. So the NFC being top-heavy, I do think the Seahawks get in. But I'm legitimately concerned about how they've looked this year.
Yeah, they just haven't been able to pull it together. You expected it to kind of, you see a bad game and they're like, oh, they'll pull it together, and they really haven't. They get the wins against the weaker teams like they should, but when they actually have to play a team that they're going to have to play later on to move forward, it hasn't turned out well. You had the
Well, they
Black
got
Friday.
another test on Thursday. They got another test on Thursday coming up.
At least we got a decent game, I hope.
Oh, great game.
Miami and New York on Black Friday. Miami got you tons of fantasy points all around. Look, Tua makes the top 10, obviously, as quarterback. Mostart makes the top 10. Waddle ties for the lead in yards after last night. It was a tie. And of course, Tyreek Hill finishes as wide receiver one yet again. He also leads the league in top 10 visits, if you will. Tyreek Hill just absolutely killing it this season, having a historic season. Trying to get the number here eight times so far this season on the top 10 list, yet again as number one. All his finishes are in the top five. Every single one all eight of those finishes are in the top five as a wide receiver. Tyreek killing it, Tua killing it, and the Jets getting killed. Garrett Wilson about the only one that got you points. Although Brees Hall had 7 receptions.
Though it didn't look good, I'm glad that the Jets finally made the change to Tim Boyle because at least it gave me something to somewhat look forward to for the game, right? Like if they were just throwing Zach back out there, we know exactly what the Jets are. I've seen enough Jets this season, okay? Like it feels like every week we get the Jets game. They have all these primetime games and solo spots, and they're televised because obviously the NFL wanted to show a lot of Aaron Rodgers in New York, and I get it. But I am so sick of watching this Jets team. They probably are the most boring team in the entire NFL with that offense that they run. But again, at least they went to Tim Boyle. So it was like, okay, let's see how this guy looks. Well, I mean, he looked a lot of the same of what Zach Wilson looked like, but at least it was something different, I guess.
I suppose. At least you got something different. You're right. Jerry says Eagles about to take the L this week on the 49ers. I don't know. It's going to be a good game, though. I'm excited for this one.
I'm excited for that one, too. That's a good one.
Bills, Eagles, Niners. They've got nice lineups. Cowboys as well.
Bills and Eagles lived up to the hype. That was the game of the week. That was the circle game of the week. It lived up to it. Overtime. Incredible game from a viewer standpoint. Let's see if Niners and Eagles can do the same. But they're already beefing a little bit on social media. They're kind of going back and forth at each other. I love that. That builds the anticipation for the game. I'm excited for this one.
Let's use this break here before we get into the Sunday games to get you guys statted up a little bit in the QB room. Oh, yeah. Statted up in the QB room. We're going to bring this one to you from toilets to titles. We talked about them last week. I love these guys. These guys are so much fun. Toilets to titles. Unlock the ultimate NFL experience with toilets to titles. They got network NFL analysts, football strategists, draft day insiders. They're going to change your season. And hey, you can go over to the Gilded app. Gilded as you would expect it to be spelled. The Gilded app, they've got all kinds of chat rooms, get all kinds of questions, 24/7 support. Toilets to titles. You can email them at toiletstitles@gmail.com or just go check them out over there at toiletstitles.com. They got a good thing going over there. Let's get you statted up a little bit in the QB room. Here is your top 10 list. You guys know this already. Jared Allen finishes again as QB1. He has done this more than once this season. Him and Prescott, the only guys to repeat as a number one. Jalen Hurts just behind him, like decimals of a point. It depends on your scoring system. Jalen Hurts comes in at second, and there's your boy Adam. Dak Prescott finishing in the third spot. CJ Stroud, OHIO, representing the rookies as he has been doing all season long in the fourth spot. We see Jay Love with his 3 touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence back in the top 10, up, down, up, down. We welcome Matt Stafford to the top 10. Patty Mahomes just kind of living here, just under the radar. We got Kyler Murray back again in the top 10. Look, I told you guys the stats are there. If you look at the stats over the last 3 years, he finishes as QB 12 or better in fantasy every single year. He doesn't have the radar. He's just sitting down there towards the bottom, finishing at number 9, but he's there. And of course, Sam Howell back on the top 10 list 5 weeks in a row. Insane what Sam Howell's doing. It's just absolutely insane. never would have thought. Look, Josh Allen's first QB to go over 40 fantasy points this season. That was a really surprising stat when I laid it when I pulled it up. Like, you would think that more QBs are accumulating more points, especially the way the NFL is played right now. But he is the first one to go over 40 all season. 4 QBs, however, this week went over 30 points, 4 total. Stafford, QB 35 to make the list this season. All 10 QBs, the top 10, they only played in 6 games. It only took 6 games to get all top 10. Absolutely insane to me as well. No top 10 QB had 2 interceptions. No top 10 QB had more than 1 interception. 5 of them had 1, but none of them had more than 2. None had 2. 3 top 10 QBs were sacked more than twice. Allen Hurts are still tied for the most times. QB, 7 quarterbacks went over 300 yards this week. 4 had 3 or more pass TDs. We know Prescott and Stafford had 4 total. 8 rush touchdowns. Allen, 2 rush, 2 pass. Hurts had 3 pass and 2 rushing touchdowns. 5 touchdowns for Jared Hurts this week. Absolutely insane. We talked about 5 quarterbacks having 2 interceptions. Out of those 5, Ritter, Tua, Boyle, Jones, and of course Dobbs last night. Oh, poor Dobbs. We'll get into him. Only Tua won. Tua's the only guy. You get those interceptions, you get more than 1, you're going to lose your game. It just breaks down like that. 13 quarterbacks with 3 or more sacks. DeVito and Goff managed to pull off a win anyway. DeVito, however, along with Geno and Baker, was sacked 6 times. 6 times in one game. Absolutely ridiculous. Boyle was sacked 7 times this week. We talk about the change with the Jets. Boyle ends up with 7 sacks. Maybe he doesn't want to be in there after all. QB1 from the previous week finally makes it back onto the top 10 list this week's only happened for the 4th time. And other than that, we talked about the top. Allen, we talked about Howell. Howell is the season leader in completion yards, also in interceptions and sacks. Josh Allen is tied with him for interception, but he leads the league in touchdowns. He leads the league in fantasy points. And, of course, Hurts leads the leagues in rushing touchdowns, where Lamar leads it in yards. But Allen, I think, is also making a fantastic case for MVP, even though everybody wants to talk about these interceptions. And that is your quarterback room. Don't worry, we got running back room and wide receiver room coming up, getting you guys statted up. Oh, yeah. We are back with Adam Hulse and you guys as well. Thanks so much for the comments. Keep them coming. We love to hear from you guys. Let us know about your fantasy week. What came out? What went good? What went bad? And everything in between. Adam, QB stats, it was a lot. It came at you fast, but what stuck out for you?
Well, a couple of things definitely stuck out. Like Allen and Hurts obviously being, the most consistent guys there shows you, again, that rushing upside is so important when it comes to quarterbacks in fantasy football. Definitely target those guys in drafts. You brought up Kyler Murray. I love Kyler Murray from a fantasy perspective. Now, real NFL, not a big fan of Murray. Most people are not a big fan of Murray when you're talking about real NFL. But he is an excellent fantasy quarterback, and just like you said, he kind of does it under the radar. Another one of those stats you threw out that was interesting was that all 10 were from 6 games. I think that highlights, again, like when you're building your fantasy football lineups, game script is very, very important. You want to be targeting guys that are in games that are likely to be high scoring. A lot of the times that's a good strategy for who you should be targeting, especially, when you're building your DFS lineups and stuff like that. I mean, look at the Bills and the Eagles games, like with everybody going off in that kind of a high scoring matchup. And, like you said, all 10 of the top 10 were only from 6 games. So a lot of those favorable high scoring game scripts came through.
And how that comes out also is that you got only 5 guys actually won their game in the top 10. Or excuse me, 6 guys. 6 guys in the top 10 won their game. 4 of them lost. And you talk about number 1, Josh Allen was number 1. Jalen Hurts was number 2. 1 and 2, same game, and Allen actually lost. So when you're playing from behind, C.J. Stroud, number 4, lost. Okay. Kyler Murray at number 9, Sam Howell at number 10. These guys lost games. They make the top 10. You talk about the game script. You got to be able to have a defense you can do it with. You got to be able not to take so many darn sacks like poor poor Boyle there. But, yeah, 100% game script matters. Look ahead to that. That's why we're doing so good in our season predictions, I think, because we kind of did look at that game script. New Orleans, Atlanta, as we rip through these morning games. Derek Carr got you over 300, got you some interceptions. Bijan Robinson almost made it. Gets to 91. But he did get in the end zone, and that's what you want to see. Kamara, not a great game like we have been seeing. Olave, fantasy-wise, gets you 114. He's your third receiver at 114, tied for top in yardage, and had the 7 catches. So you were happy that Olave was back on your roster this week. But other than that, you probably watched this on Red Zone or something like that, caught the highlights, and that was about it.
Yeah, and I mean, just the battle for the absolutely atrocious NFC South, right? One of these teams is going to make the playoffs. One of these teams from the NFC South is going to be in the playoffs. None of the 4 of them deserve to be there. Look, this was something that I found very interesting, too, with the way the NFC South standings look. The Buccaneers are like 1 game out of winning the division title. They're also... Yeah, they're also in the top 10 for the NFL draft next year. So they're both in the mix to have like a super high draft pick and a division title. That's unbelievable.
Maybe that's the advantage to playing in that horrendous division is you can win the division and still get a top 10
and still get a good draft pick, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Jerry Bagshaw, congratulations. 2nd round of the playoffs in the Scott Fish. Nice job. Well done, son.
All right.
But I have a ton of guys on bye next week. Yeah, 6 bye games. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. 6 teams on the bye next week. It's not a good time right before the playoffs to have some of your guys on bye for sure. Next up on the fantasy games, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. Let's go Steelers. I told you, game script. And admittedly, this one probably didn't make a lot of sense until Burrow went down, but unfortunately Burrow did go down. Najee Harris decided to play 1 game this year and show up 99 yards on the ground. So close. Pat Freiermuth with 120 showing up. Jamar Chase still did well for you. He got over 80 yards. He got you the receptions. He got you some double-digit points. He just didn't get in the end zone. And, poor Jake Browning, he did everything he could. But, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, your Steelers really making that run to the playoff spot. It looked ugly doing it, but they're winning the games. The offense looks better without Matt Canada, right? They finally look like a, cohesive, coherent, productive offense. Maybe that'll be the storyline for the Steelers down the stretch now. Once firing Canada, this offense wakes up, and maybe things won't look as ugly as they've looked for the rest of the year.
I hope so. But that's what I said when I predicted double-digit wins. I said it was the schedule. I said it wasn't the skill set. It wasn't how good this team was. It was the schedule. And we stole one here. We stole one back because Cleveland should have been a win, but we stole this one back, and we remain in contention. Another division win, so that's going to be big for them. Tennessee at Carolina, kind of a snoozer. Nothing really going on. Derrick Henry gets a 76. Bryce Young actually leads in yardage for this one with 194. Still not as bad as the Monday night game. But Derrick Henry finds the end zone twice, and that's really what brought it home for people. Even Chuba Hubbard found the end zone once for people that were kind of plugging him in just in that flex position, having that extra spot in there. So you got a couple fantasy points where you wanted them, but I mean, it's Carolina and Tennessee. Carolina, of course, firing Frank Reich. I don't know if they should have done that, but there it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think they probably should have waited till the off season to do that, but or maybe not even considering it's his first year and they just drafted the quarterback that, according to all reports, Frank Reich didn't want. Frank Reich wanted C.J. Stroud, if you believe all of the reports that are out there right now, and it was David Tepper, the owner, that wanted Bryce Young, and he basically overruled the head coach. So maybe that situation there has more to do with it. Like maybe the owner kind of feeling like, he's not getting the most out of Bryce Young because he didn't want him anyway. So I need to get a head coach who believes in and wants this quarterback, not the guy, still wishing that he would have took C.J. Stroud.
Or maybe I need a head coach that'll do what I tell him to do because I want to be like Jerry Jones, and Frank Reich wasn't
Yeah,
going to do it. So that's another
yeah.
possibility, I think, as well.
Could be.
Derrick Henry squeaks in at number 10. Chuba actually hit number 11. He almost made it. They both had 20 point something, 20.6 for Henry, 20.2 for Chuba. So Chuba just misses out on the top 10. But both of them make it there. Nice to see Henry back in the end zone. We got Tampa and Indianapolis. Stat wise, fantasy wise, not horrible. Again, we said nobody was going to like win your week in this one. But look, Jonathan Taylor, J-Tay back on the top 10. J-Tay back in the end zone with 2 touchdowns, 91 yards in this one. A couple catches. No catches for him in this one. Mike Evans shows up yet again. He finishes at number 2 this week for your wide receivers. Rachaad White, I don't know, 100 rush yards, but he's done okay fantasy wide. Not the rushing yards, but he gets 100 rushing yards. Too bad he didn't find the end zone. Baker Mayfield, 199, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Again, not good enough for the top 10, but if you're playing in a super flex or something like that, good enough for you there. Gardner Minshew gets the win at home, though, and you got 2 teams that have won games they shouldn't, lost games they shouldn't, and Indianapolis, as they say, in the hunt.
Well, Indianapolis not only in the hunt right now. If the season ended today, they're in the playoffs. They have one of those wild card spots right now.
Yep.
Look, let me just say, my guy Gardner Minshew, that I talked about a lot during the offseason, that if he always finds a way. He's kind of like Taylor Heineke right now, right? Like every year he finds his way like onto the field despite being like the backup, and every time he gets his chance to come onto the field, he plays very well. Now, Gardner Minshew's never going to be like a top 10 quarterback or anything like that, but the guy balls. He knows how to win games. He makes good decisions. He plays, like he's a grinder too. And look what he's doing with the Colts. I mean, with how deep and how good the AFC conference is, the Colts are one of the teams that are in the playoffs right now. And this is unbelievable too. We talked really down on the AFC South division before this season when we did all of our previews. They might get 3 teams in the playoffs. The Jags, the Texans, and the Colts all might make the playoffs. Unbelievable. That's why I love the NFL, because you never see this stuff coming.
We got Jags, Texans. I saw a picture, a meme or something like that, and it showed the Jags. Jags used to have like the best backup quarterback squad in NFL history. It showed like Gardner Minshew, Foles, and Dobbs all in Jags uniform. I don't know if that was accurate.
There you go.
Someone put that together, but I think Dobbs was like on the practice squad there or something like there. But we are going to talk about that Jacksonville-Houston game coming up. But first, we got to talk about very briefly the Giants and New England. Again, you got what you pay for in this one. Nothing really going on. Again, DeVito gets sacked a few times, walks away with the win though. He's 2-0, right? I don't know. Barkley does not show up in this one. Hyatt is one of your 100-yard receivers this week. We'll talk about how many there were when we get you guys set it up on wide receivers. 5 receptions, 109 yards. He did lead. I'll ruin this stat for you. He did lead in yards per catch with over 20. 5 receptions for 109. So, I mean, you got to try and find it's silver lining time when you talk about New England and the Giants. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about this game. You said Jalen Hyatt. Maybe a waiver wire target this week, especially in deeper leagues. Like he could be a guy that you add, for, if you're doing bad, basically for nothing or super cheap, or if you need, with a lot of bye weeks this week, right? Like, why not? Like Jalen Hyatt, maybe he's going to be their guy the rest of the year. When it comes to DeVito and winning games, is that really what you want if you're a Giants fan? Like, if I'm a Giants fan, I'd be a little bit annoyed right now that they're winning a couple of games.
There's my multi-million-dollar quarterback. I got this guy coming.
Right, yeah. I mean, like there's Jones and then there's DeVito, and then, there was talks that, the Giants were going to be in the mix for, one of the top picks, maybe the top pick. They could be in, getting one of these quarterbacks maybe if they don't like Jones. By DeVito playing, like, decently well, he's not going to win the job for next year. Like, that's not going to happen. It's just kind of like by DeVito winning, he's kind of saving Daniel Jones' job.
Popcorn, get your popcorn. Oh, you need a quarterback? Okay, I'm in. I got it. I got it. We see next week the Giants are actually on bye, so I guess you're not going to grab Hyatt for next week. Buffalo, Chicago. Allen, your number one guy, he's out. Chicago, we'll talk about Fields. He's fantasy valuable. Las Vegas, Baltimore, there goes Lamar, and Josh Dobbs, who needs a break after last night. We will talk about that as well. One more game in the morning bracket, and we'll get you statted up on RBs, and that is that Jacksonville-Houston game. Fantasy points all around. Here's some for you. You get fantasy points. You get fantasy points. Stroud finishes as QB4. Lawrence, I believe, was number 6. Both of them over 300 yards this week. There's 2 of your 7 right there. Two, same game again. 2 of your 7 over 300 right there. Stroud gets 2 passing, 1 rushing. ETN could have done a little better. I'd like to see that. But Ridley shows up again. That's 2 weeks in a row. Ridley shows up on your roster. 89, 5 receptions, 89, a touchdown. Not good enough for the top 10. I think he finished 11. But right there, Nico Collins, 7 for 104 and a touchdown. Welcome back, Nico. Nico on the top 10 list 4 times this week. He's either on the top 10 or he's like doesn't even get you 15 points. Same with Ridley. It's just Nico's done it more. This was a good game. It was fun to watch. It came down to the wire. I actually thought Stroud might pull this off.
Yeah, I mean, then he almost forced overtime. He did what he had to do to get there. Then the kicker goes off the crossbar to miss that game-time field goal.
It was right I mean, it hit the middle of the crossbar. Oh, man, what a doink. Oh.
Look, like this was one of the games of the week, like in terms of excitement, in terms of how fun the game was. And what gets me excited too is like this is a game we get to see twice a year now. Stroud versus Trevor Lawrence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Divisional opponents. Like this could be a new rivalry brewing, like 2 top tier quarterbacks that are going to get to go at it twice a year. That gets me really excited. And when it comes to Trevor Lawrence, he's turning it on. He had a very slow first half of this season. The Jags were winning games. Lawrence wasn't doing a whole lot. All of a sudden, just like last year in the second half of the season, he's playing better than the first half. Kind of Burrow-esque, what Burrow did the last couple years too, right? Just get better as the year goes on. That's what I'm seeing for Trevor Lawrence right now.
Yeah, I mean, do we believe the hype? I got to see one more week. I know you don't. I do. I got to see one more week. Let's get you guys statted up in the RB room real quick. Oh, yeah. In the RB room, let's make it so you guys can see it. 3rd week in a row that the number 1 RB had 0 rush yards. That's crazy. That I don't get that stat either. I want to go to the top 10 list. That's what I'm trying to get to. Thanks, guys. Tyreek Hill. That's wide receivers, guys. Okay, look, it doesn't matter what the top 10 is. You guys know what the top 10 is for this week. Look, we had Kyron Williams as RB1. He absolutely destroyed this week. 143 on the ground, 2 touchdowns receiving. But again, 3rd week in a row, number 1 RB, no running touchdowns. That's how the NFL is. That's how it goes. Christian McCaffrey at number 2. Bijan Robinson at number 3. Welcome back to the list, Bijan. Isaiah Pacheco finishes at 4. Josh Jacobs had this huge run. It was awesome to watch. Finishes at 5. Hello, Pollard. Thank you, Fantasy Rosters, for making it back on the list. Ramondre Stevenson at number 7. Raheem Mostert finishes at 8. Not as high as you want, but in a game full of stats to be number 8, still good. All the Dolphins made it. J-Tay again at 9. Derrick Henry makes 10. We talked about Hubbard at 11. But the stats that you guys care about, only 4 running backs went over 100 yards in week 12. That's cray-cray. 7 running backs had multiple TDs, though. 14 running backs had a rushing touchdown. 3 had the receiving touchdown. And, you know, it was just great for running backs. 15 running backs over 15 points, 10 over 20. 4 had 20 or more attempts. 3 of those 4 made it to the top 10. 10 had 5 or more receptions, and those 5 all made the top 10. 5 of those 10 made the top 10. So 10 running backs had 5 receptions or more. 5 of those made the top 10. There we go. Williams, the only guy with 2 receiving touchdowns. Bijan also had 2 total of that. Everybody, you have 5 running backs that had 2 rushing touchdowns. So you had total of 7 of the 10 running backs with 2 rushing touchdowns. That's how that breaks down. Third week in a row, the RB1 had 0 rushing touchdowns. We talked about that. Previous RB1 not in the top 10 for only the 4th time. So it's reverse of what wide receivers and quarterbacks are doing. Usually the number 1 guy does not make it. With the running backs, they had been making it. This time, it did not happen. Ramonde was number 1 in rush attempts at 21. He did make the list. Hall was number 1 in receptions with 7. And we talked about the points there. That 15 running backs are above 15 points this week. Usually it's around 14. 10 running backs were over 20, and usually it's only 7. Okay, 2 go over 30, and that's only the 12th time that a running back has gone over 30. Only 9 separate running backs have actually done it, though. We know Mostert's done it 3 times, and CMC does it this time, getting over 30. And that is your running back room as we get you guys statted up for that. We bring Adam back in. Again, the statted up stuff, it comes fast. We release these on Instagram as well. So you guys go on Instagram and shorts and stuff and find these as well. But what jumped out at you about the running back stats?
Well, I mean, thank God for Kyron Williams. I mean, I have him in multiple leagues, and him making his return this week probably won me like 3 leagues this week, just his return alone. So thank God for Kyron Williams.
And
something that kind of jumped. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, this was a good week for running backs, and like kind of a much needed good week for running backs. We've kind of been waiting for like a week like this for most of the season. And, something I was thinking about this week when it comes to fantasy running backs is a lot of these teams have been using a lot more committee, not giving their featured backs as many touches as usual. But a lot of that has been because they're kind of trying to preserve them to be as good or better later in the season than early, right? Well, we're there now. So, like, what I'm circling right now, what I'm targeting in DFS, in lineups, is running backs on teams trying to make a run at the playoffs right now, or are trying to round into form for a deep playoff run. Guys like Bijan, guys like Tony Pollard, you know what I mean? Like, they're kind of coming to mind that they kind of had slower seasons early on, and they kind of picked up their production a little bit lately. And now the teams, it's like, save them for what? Like the Falcons have a legitimate chance to win their division. What are you saving Bijan for anymore? It's time to unleash him. There's only a few games left. You preserved him for this reason so that you could turn him loose at some point. So that's the thing I'm watching with running backs, that maybe some of these featured guys that normally weren't getting their usual workloads, I'm watching for a few of them to pop in this last little stretch.
And look, something else that you can't ignore is the receiving. We had over 20 get over 5 targets. We had, what did we say? We had 10. 10 had 5 or more receptions. Okay, Breece Hall had 7. Kyron Williams had 6 receptions this week, as did Pollard in the top 10. Cook and Singletary also with 6. And again, like you said, a good week. We actually had 11 backs at 20 or more points, which is well above the average. Again, 7 is usually the average for backs above 20. We had 11 over 20 this week. So yeah, we'll see if that trend continues as these weeks go on. And you make a good point. Maybe they've just been saving them. One game that they saved all their backs in was the Denver-Cleveland game. As we get into the afternoon slate, Denver dominates this game, though. They are 5 in a row. They were at 1-5 at one point. Now they are rattled off 5 in a row. They are in the hunt, and they have just turned it on, despite the fact that Russell Wilson was the leading passer with 134 yards. Both DTR, who went out, and Russell Wilson both had 134 yards. So you didn't get a lot of stats in this one. The storyline is the fact that Denver won it against one of the league's best defenses, and they are in the hunt.
Yeah, I mean, they're, minus the Eagles, they're the hottest team in the NFL right now, right? The Broncos are playing smart, solid, and let's just say it, they're playing Sean Payton football. That's what they're doing. Like, this is what Sean Payton does. Like, he's an offensive genius. We know that. But like, it's not necessarily about the high flying numbers all the time. Let's remember post Drew Brees, in those last couple years when Drew Brees couldn't even throw the ball anymore, they were still winning a ton of games because Sean Payton knows how to manufacture wins. He won games with Trevor Siemian at quarterback. He went 5-2 with Jameis Winston at quarterback. Sean Payton knows how to coach games in the NFL. He knows how to manufacture wins, and he knows how to run an offense that's going to be favorable for his quarterback. Russ has been playing unbelievable over these last few weeks. He's making smart decisions. He's using his legs to make plays, which is something he got away from for a while. Now that he's back to doing that a little more aggressively again, world of difference in how games are turning out for him. And most importantly, he's not turning it over.
Only 34 yards, but he had 11 attempts, and he did have a couple good runs, got himself some touchdowns, and he even got himself a rushing touchdown in this one. So one of our multi-touchdown quarterbacks from this week. We get into the Rams and Cardinals. Rams come away big. We talked about Kyren Williams. Matt Stafford makes the top 10 list. Kyler Murray did as well. Matt Stafford with 4 touchdowns through the air. He played lights out, only 1 interception. Kyler Murray being quiet. Here's the problem. James Conner with 27 yards. This is really the issue here. I mean, Marquise Brown has 6 for 88. Trey McBride goes 7 for 60. So, they can pass the ball, but there's no run game in Arizona right now, and that is really what's hurting him. On the opposite side, the Rams, they can just pass all day. Kyren Williams with 2, Tyler Higbee with 2, Puka catches 4 receptions. They're just tossing it around. And, oh, by the way, Kyren goes for 143. Royce goes for 77 and a touchdown. So, I got it. It's against Arizona, but the Rams looked like a total team this week.
Yeah, and the Rams are another one of these teams that they haven't been great this year, but that 7th spot in the NFC playoff picture is kind of wide open, right?
Yeah.
The Rams might be a team that can make a run at it. If their offense keeps playing like it played this week, they can make a run at it. If Kyron's going off like that and Cooper Kupp can wake back up a little bit, he's been quiet. These last few weeks, Cooper Kupp has definitely been quiet. But if, they can get him going again, along with what Kyren is doing, this can be a really good offense. I mean, we've seen it in the past. And again, the Vikings having the 7 seed, a lot of teams can kind of sneak into that last spot and then just get destroyed by the 49ers in the first round.
Exactly. That's exactly what would happen. But, hey, at least you can say you made the playoffs. Kansas City, Las Vegas. Poor Aiden O'Connell. He's doing everything he can. 248, 1 touchdown, no interception. He's protecting the ball. Josh Jacobs rattles off 110 for a touchdown. That was nice for your fantasy roster. Jacoby Myers, 6 receptions for 79 and a touchdown. So he got you some points. Adams got you 12, but he didn't find the end zone. And that's really where Adams hurt you. On the other side, Patty Mahomes, 2 yards short of that 300. He gets you the 2 touchdowns. He finishes in the top 10. Patty Mahomes being Patty Mahomes. Pacheco got you 2. He got in the end zone twice, 15 for 55. And Rashee Rice, a little bit of a surprise. He seems to kind of be consistently showing up a little bit. Of course, Kelsey had 6 for 91, but no end zone, as Rashee Rice is the one who finds it. 8 receptions, 107, and a touchdown. Finishes as wide receiver 3 this week. And I don't know if you trust in it, but, he has been showing, some flashes, and maybe Kansas City will give you a receiver to go along with Patrick Mahomes. Maybe.
I like Rashee Rice, and I think it's pretty obvious that he's the one receiver that Patrick Mahomes trusts. Though he's the youngest receiver. Yeah, he did, and they're building chemistry. Mahomes likes him. I started Rashee Rice in a couple of leagues this week. Look, I mean, no Kadarius Toney, no McCole Hardman, no Jerick McKinnon. There were some targets that were going to kind of be available this week. And again, after what happened with Valdez-Scantling last week and Justin Watson last week, Mahomes might be, a little bit frustrated with, those drops that they had at the end of the game that, could have cost them against the Eagles. Rashee Rice seems like the guy he really counts on. And by the way, he really likes him in the red zone, too. When they get down close to the end zone, they're drawing up a lot of plays for Rashee Rice.
Yeah, and he's got five or more targets in all but 3 games this season. So, I mean, they are trying to give him the ball. He had 10 targets, pulled in 8 of them this week, and that's going to help going down the road. They've got Green Bay up next. So I actually kind of expect Rashee Rice to show out again this week. Might be a good waiver wire pickup if he's still out there, especially with all the bye weeks that we talked about. Philly and Buffalo, you got all the fireworks, you got all the stats that you wanted. Even James Cook, but that's what you kind of expect from James Cook. I did play Gabe Davis. I called that one. They said don't play him. If you looked at all the lists, they said don't play Gabe Davis. I said bull crap. Threw him in, made myself some money. Gabe Davis coming in 105. 6 receptions and a touchdown. Josh Allen just absolutely killing it. Has 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns through his usual pick. But, like we said, picks are from guys who are trying to win. A lot of your top guys are sitting at the top of the list on picks. Jalen Hurts ends up with 5 touchdowns total, not to be outdone by Allen. Still finishes QB2 by decimal points, depending on how it scores. DeAndre Swift, some big runs, 14 for 80. Jalen Hurts, 14 for 65. And, of course, those 2 touchdowns. And, hello, Devonta Smith. He comes up. He's kind of like the Tyler Lockett of the Eagles. 106, 7 receptions, 106, and a touchdown. A.J. Brown does find the end zone to save your fantasy day as he goes 5 for 37. And Zacchaeus makes just one of the best catches of the weekend in this one. But Buffalo falls short by a field goal. Philly wins.
Well, I mean, again, another team had the Eagles on the ropes. A game that they could have closed out. The Eagles have trailed by at least a touchdown. And I think it's their past 5 games. It's their past 4 or 5 games in a row they've trailed by a touchdown or more in the second half, with 3 or 4 of those games being by double digits in the second half. Yet they keep finding ways to pull those games out. That's props to Jalen Hurts. Look, you mentioned Gabe Davis. I was right there with you with Gabe Davis this week. The Eagles have given up like 1 million passing yards to their opponents this year. Their pass defense has been one of the worst in the NFL. So I agree. Like, I like Gabe Davis this week. I get it. Kincaid and Shakir have been getting a lot of targets lately, and they're, kind of building their role in this offense as well. But, I mean, we know who Gabe Davis is. He's always been the boom or bust guy. He has, it's insane that, he's the only wide receiver I know that truly has wide receiver 1 potential in a lot of weeks, but also potential to give you a goose egg in those exact same weeks. It's unbelievable, his range of outcomes. But in a game like that I was expecting to be high scoring, and against, like I said, a very bad passing defense this season, that was a spot that I liked Gabe Davis too.
How'd you like that Devonta Smith, Tyler Lockett comparison from the fans?
I like that a lot.
Does it work?
Devonta Smith definitely speedier than Lockett, but I do like the comparison in that the way Jalen Hurts, the way he looks to Devonta and the spots that he uses him in the routes that he runs, I do think that's a lot like you said. It's like when Russell and Tyler Lockett, not so much Geno and Lockett.
Yeah, I agree. It's just you want Devonta to do well. And when he does, when he shows up, he's big. He makes the top 10 list this week. We wrap up the games. Baltimore at Los Angeles. Again, the Chargers put up some stats. Keenan Allen ends up in the top 10 list. Herbert we talked about all these stats, completions, yards, touchdowns, and all this stuff. Herbert is number 5 across the board. If you look at the top 10 list, you got different guys kind of at the top. Some of the, you got Allen, you got Prescott, you got Tua. Of course, Sam Howell leads in all those different categories. And then it's Herbert all the way across. It's interesting. But not getting the wins. They lose again to Baltimore. Lamar Jackson, highest in rush yards. He got you a little bit of fantasy points. You wanted more. From Jackson, but you've kind of wanted that for a while. Keenan Allen doing what Keenan Allen does, leads the league in receptions for this week. 14 receptions, 106. Doesn't find himself the end zone. Didn't really need to. Still got you plenty of fantasy points. You were happy with it. 24 without the touchdown. Keenan Allen gets 24 fantasy points without the touchdown. That's ugly. That's insane. Not a lot from the receiving room, although Zay Flowers finally showed up. I never thought I would say it. I never thought that Zay Flowers was going to make the list. Welcome to the top 10 list. Zay Flowers, first time this season, 5 for 25 and a touchdown. And he had the the rushing touchdown as well on a 37-yard scamper. So welcome, respect for your one time on the list. I hope you don't keep it up because nothing personal, but I just don't believe in it. But anyway, that's nothing personal there. Keenan Allen, he's really the story. He's going to be the story. He's going to keep being the story all year. Keenan Allen, Keenan Allen, Keenan Allen.
Yeah, and like there was a crazy stat that they showed on the broadcast during that game of any wide receiver in NFL history who's played at least 100 games. Keenan Allen averages the most receptions per game in NFL history, 6.5
NFL
receptions
history.
per game. Yeah, ever. 6.5 receptions per game in his career. That's unbelievable. And yet every year people sleep on him going into draft season that he's getting old and he's going to fall off, and they got these young guys now, blah, blah, blah. Keenan Allen is a stud every single season. Look, this game was very entertaining to me. This was a good matchup. It was kind of back and forth. Both teams felt like they had a chance to win it, which to me meant there was no doubt about it that the Ravens were going to win it, right? The Chargers never win these games. These nail biters, these one-score games, these down-to-the-wire games, they find ways to lose them every single time. Now, we brought up Frank Reich earlier in the show of whether he should have been fired at this point. If any coach should have been fired right now, it's Brandon Staley. With the talent that he has on this roster, to only have 4 wins is an absolute joke. And to not be able to win close games with a quarterback like Justin Herbert, with a superstar like Keenan Allen, and a ton of talent on defense as well. If you can't win games with this roster, you got to go.
And let me tell you something about Keenan Allen. And you're absolutely right. He's got to be on the hot seat. He's got to be. There's just no way you can maintain your job and lose that many games.
This roster has 4 wins? 4? Like, you got to be kidding me.
Keenan Allen, we know he's been in the top 10 the last 3 weeks in a row. He's also gotten over 100 yards the last 3 weeks in a row. Not a lot of receivers can say that, including the 175 game a few weeks back. He's also had double-digit receptions for the last 3 weeks in a row. Not just double-digit targets, double-digit receptions for the last 3 weeks in a row. Upcoming games, New England, Denver, Las Vegas, Buffalo, Denver again, and Kansas City. You got to be careful with those Denver games because they're actually shutting receivers down pretty good. But other than that, New England, Las Vegas, Buffalo, Kansas City, nice run there for your playoffs because you shouldn't be playing playoffs in week 18. So you should be good there. You don't want to play against Kansas City. Kansas City defense against wide receiver ones is absolutely nasty. And then, of course, you had the snoozer last night, all field goals except for one Hawkinson touchdown. Both quarterbacks absolutely horrible. Dobbs ends up with 4 interceptions. He needs this week off. Just not a lot to talk about in this one except just real crappy games. Hawkinson, really the only one. Although DJ Moore does make the top 10 list, 11 with 114 yards. So you got over 20 with DJ Moore as well. But that's really about it in this one. Unless you play kickers.
Yeah. I mean, your kickers did well in this one, right? I mean, absolutely awful game. Especially for a primetime nationally televised game, this may have been the worst one of the season so far with the way that the game, like, just so sloppy and ugly and just, like, nothing really redeeming about it. The one thing I don't like is that Kevin O'Connell said after the game that they're going to reassess their quarterback situation during the bye week. I mean, come on now. You traded for Josh Dobbs. The guy's been unbelievable for you. Now, granted, he was an absolute disaster in that Monday night game. He threw, 4 interceptions, I believe. I understand he had a very bad game, but, like, reassess your quarterback situation to what? You going back to Jaron Hall? You're going to Nick Mullins? Like, like, what are you going to do? Sign Nick Foles? I mean, to me, that was not the statement that O'Connell should have said. He should have said, look, the guy's been unbelievable for us since we got him. He had a bad game. We fully support him with how good he's been for us. We know he'll get past it. Done. Move on. But now their story for the bye week, anybody talking about the Vikings is going to be saying, is Dobbs still their quarterback? Is he the guy going forward? O'Connell said they're going to reassess the situation. That's not the storyline you want right now.
Yeah. I don't know.
You're not supposed to create your own quarterback drama, especially for a team. that has a legitimate chance of still getting to the playoffs despite losing their quarterback for the entire season in
There it
Cousins
is, right there.
and losing Jefferson for half of the year as well. You
Yeah.
lost those two guys and you still have a legitimate shot at making the playoffs, and you
Yes.
want to create your own quarterback controversy around your own team? That made no
Hey,
sense to me.
you had one. Yeah, guy had one. He's been killing it for you. He's been killing. What a
Uh-huh.
stand-in. You just grab what a stand-in. He has one bad night, and now you're gonna throw him under the bus. Made no sense.
Yep.
Let's get into a little segment that we do here called the Hulse with Pulse, or get the Pulse with Hulse. It's the fantasy Hulse check. You actually stole a couple of my questions this week, so we're going to shoot a little bit from the hip. But what we're going to do here is I give a couple questions to Adam about the current state of the NFL. He answers them back. He has no knowledge of these questions, and so this is coming right off the hip for NFL writer over at Sportskeeda, Mr. Adam Hulse. I want to make this big real quick because you are the guy right there. You can see some of the addresses on there. I'm going to pull the number down just for a minute. You guys can always call into the show. We love to have you. But this is the Pulse Check with Adam Hulse. Adam, I was gonna ask about coaching changes, so I'm gonna start there. You've already kind of talked about it, and so, but if there's anything you want to add or reiterate, let's do that now. Which coaches are on the hot seat as opposed to? I don't think Dabo up in Giants land. I don't think he's on the hot seat. He's had some bad breaks. He's had some injuries. I think he's still going to get another year or two to figure things out. But we see Reich get fired. You talked about the lack of production with all that talent in for LA. Who else are we kind of looking at in coach wise? As
I agree with you on Dayball. I think he's definitely going to get at least another year with getting that Giants team to the playoffs last year, despite their lack of talent. And even, with DeVito winning a couple of games now, I think that works in Dayball's favor as well. He's like, look, I can even win with a third string quarterback. Now, if you want to know how I feel about Brandon Staley, just rewind this episode about 2 minutes and you can go listen to my rant about how awful of a head coach Brandon Staley is. I think he has to be gone. I would fire him now. Like, I don't even know why they're waiting for the offseason. Just do it now, get rid of him, move on. He can't be a head coach. He's proven he can't do it. Two other guys that I think will definitely be out of a job by year's end. Matt Eberflus in Chicago. Whether they're sticking with Fields or drafting a quarterback is yet to be seen for the Bears' plans. But I think either way, it's time to get rid of Eberflus, bring in a new head coach, see if they can either get more out of Fields or if they're drafting a quarterback. Do you really want Eberflus to start fresh with your new quarterback? It didn't work out with Fields, so you kind of got to make that change. A lot of times that head coach quarterback can go hand in hand in these draft situations. And then the other one that I think is fairly obvious, Ron Rivera's done after this year. I mean, this has to be his last year with the Commanders. There's new
he wants
ownership.
To be done, right?
Maybe he wants to be done, but whether he wants to or not, I think is going to be irrelevant. With the new ownership, they're going to want to pick their own head coach. I like Ron Rivera a lot. He's accomplished some great things in the NFL, but he's old news at this point, right? And with this fresh ownership and a young owner, they're going to want to hire a new head coach, and it's probably going to be a young, up and coming type of head coach, not a guy who's been around the block already.
That's interesting. I think it might actually be a veteran that gets over there. But I guess, we'll see. And like I said, you're usually right. Number one and two quarterback this week, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Number 1 and 2 quarterback for the entire season, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Like you said, we got the game that we expected in this one. I want to run down the top 10 for the season, and I want to get your reaction when you hear the names that are there or maybe that are not there. Number 1, Josh Allen. Number 2, Jalen Hurts. Number 3, your boy Dak Prescott. Number 4, Sam Howell. We already talked about this. Mind-blowing how many categories he leads in the NFL. Number 5, Justin Herbert. Like I said, right there, number 5 across the board. Number 6, CJ Stroud. 7, Lamar Jackson. 8, Patty Mahomes. 9, Jordan Love. And number 10, Josh Dobbs. What do you think about that list?
Well, there's a lot of mobile guys in that list, and it's a theme that we talk about a lot, with the rushing upside with quarterbacks. not only does it give them a much higher ceiling, but quarterbacks who run often have significantly higher floors than the ones that don't. My guy Dak Prescott, I love to see what he's doing. It's insane how high Prescott is when you consider the first half of the season. He finished outside of the top 15 in every single week. I think it was for the first 8 weeks. He was finishing like QB 25, QB 30. He was literally doing nothing statistically, though the Cowboys were winning games. And look, a lot like what I said with Russell Wilson before, that he's being a little more aggressive with his legs again, and that's really opened things up. I can say the same thing for Dak Prescott. He obviously had that gruesome ankle injury a couple years ago. Last season, I felt like he had so many more opportunities to take off and get games with his legs that he didn't take advantage of. Maybe he was tentative with that ankle. Maybe he wasn't fully confident in it yet. This year, I'm seeing that when the defense gives him room to run, he's not forcing the throw anymore. He's taking it. He's getting the first down. He's getting out of bounds. I think that has really opened things back up for Dak Prescott and the entire offense.
And he said he was going to get the interceptions down. He's only got 23 touchdowns on 6 interceptions. That's a fantastic stat line to have.
He guaranteed it. He guaranteed it, and he lived up to it.
He did. You talked about the rushing. 6 of the top 10 are in the top 10 for rushing attempts. So out of the top 10 rushing attempts at quarterback, 6 of your overall top 10 are there. 8 of the top 11 lead in rush yards. So you take the top 11 quarterbacks in rush yards, 8 of your top 10 are in that as well. Mobile quarterbacks, it's the way they play nowadays, the way the big kids play. Last, I want to talk about the records. You've already kind of touched up on the records. You talked about how in the South, the AFC South, you can see 3 teams there. I don't know. What's really sticking out for you about where we sit standing wise going into, well, honestly, fantasy playoffs start in the next couple weeks for most leagues, but as the NFL playoffs are still a little bit down the corner or down the road, what's sticking out for you in the standings?
Well, yeah, I touched on it earlier and you brought it up again, and it's the AFC South has been one of the biggest surprises. And it's not just the Texans, but it's the Colts too. This was a division that we pinned before the year that the Jags are probably just going to run away with this division. The other 3 teams have 0 shot at making it into the playoffs. Now they might get 3 out of their 4 teams in, which is especially really surprising with how deep and how many teams are still alive in that AFC. Look, I talk about it all the time. This is what makes the NFL such a special product as compared to any other league out there. And it's that you can do all the predictions and breakdowns and analysis as you want before the season. And then halfway through a season, a lot of your opinions are going to change on so many players, on so many teams. There's always going to be teams that are much better than you expected them to be, and vice versa. There's always going to be teams that are a lot worse than you expect them to be. And when you really look at this AFC playoff race, it is insane how many teams are fighting for those wild card spots and how many teams have a legitimate case to be there at this point too. It's going to be a great stretch with teams like the Texans, the Broncos, the Browns, the Steelers, the Colts. All of these teams have been playing well enough that if they were in the NFC, they'd be in the playoffs. But the AFC is so deep that this race over these last few weeks is going to be really exciting to watch.
And these wild card spots are going to 6-win teams. Well, guess what? The last place teams, the Titans and Los Angeles Chargers, they're sitting at 4. They're only 2 games back of a wild card spot. The entire AFC is in the hunt, as they like to say. Here's a fun stat for everybody. Every single division leader has a 2-game lead on the next person back, except of course the must-win NFC South, where they are both tied at 5, Tampa with 4. But you mentioned a different picture in the NFC, a lot more established. But again, 6 is still your wild card spot, and all but 2 teams, Arizona Cardinals, Carolina Panthers, they are basically out of it. But again, Tampa has 4, the Rams have 5. We talked about the Saints and the Falcons both have 5. The Packers have 5. So again, a lot of teams still in this. The Giants and Commanders actually both have 4. So with 6 being the number for both sides, there's still a lot of teams in this, and every win still counts for these last place bad teams.
Yeah, and like just one more thing I want to say about that too is how sometimes records can be deceiving too, right? Like when you look at the AFC records with so many teams bunched up at 6, a lot of those teams are better than, quote unquote 6-win teams, but the AFC is just beating each other up. Like they're all playing against each other. So a lot of these good teams, one of them's got to lose, right? But what really excites me about the AFC too, with so many teams alive, is a lot of these teams, and some of them that I mentioned, like the Browns, like the Broncos, if they get into the playoffs, they can legitimately upset one of those top seeds.
Oh, absolutely.
Like they can go on the road and they can beat some of those top teams. I don't feel the same way about the NFC necessarily. The NFC, as I keep saying, they're very top heavy. You look at the Eagles, you look at the Niners, you look at the Cowboys, and I guess you can kind of look at the Lions too, right? Those other teams that are going to get in the playoffs, when they go on the road to play some of those teams, they're just going to get smoked, and like the Cowboys are probably going to go on the road to an NFC South team, and they'll probably be favored by 10 plus points in that first round of the playoffs, right? So for me, the NFC is more about the later rounds, right? Like when we get those Eagles versus Niners or Niners versus Cowboys, like those kind of matchups. Well, I'm super excited for the AFC is what the wild card round is going to look like. Because, like, let's say, like we get a situation where it's like Broncos at Chiefs. The Broncos have a chance to win that game. You know what I mean?
You've got Pittsburgh and Cleveland sitting at 7 wins, where you've got Buffalo and Houston sitting at 6. Even Indianapolis is sitting at 6. Now, obviously, I'm going to take Buffalo over Indianapolis if those two meet up at six wins.
Yeah,
each.
I mean, what division winner is going to want to see Buffalo as a potential wild card team in the first round of the playoffs?
No, thank you. I do not want to play that game. We got to move on, and I'm sorry for that, Adam, but thank you for taking that and putting yourself out there. We love the Hulse Check. Hands down, one of my favorite segments of the show. I love it. Adam taking those off the hip. Bringing up that stat of everybody being 2 games back, all division leaders only 2-game lead, or with a 2-game lead, if you will, on the next person back in every single division, except that someone must win AFC South. Another great stat. Let's finish getting you statted up at the wide receiver. Oh, yeah. All right. In your wide receiver room, we got Tyreek Hill at number 1. Yet again, 8 appearances on the list. Mike Evans at number 2. Ashley Ball absolutely balling out. A Kansas City receiver makes the top 10 list and comes all the way up to number 3. Rashee Rice, look at you, boy. Devontae Smith at number 3. Nico Collins is up there. Zay Flowers finally making the list. Everybody says he's going to be great. Yeah, not so much this year, but he does this week. Keenan Allen, another resident person on the list with 6 visits. Gabe Davis, told you he was going to be there at number 8. DJ Moore comes in. The only highlight of last night comes in at number 4. And Deebo Samuel comes in for his 2nd visit on the list. Here's some stats for you. 12 wide receivers went over 100 yards this week. It was only 7 last week. So a big pass week, or maybe the matchups against pass defenses were there. 12 versus 7. 12 receivers went over 100 yards. 7 of those 12 ended up in the top 10 list. 3 receivers with double-digit receptions. Allen, of course, led with 14. Evans and Flowers are the only 2 people that had multiple touchdowns. They each had 2. Evans had both his in the air. Flowers ran one of his in. 24 receiving TDs versus I threw in a little thing there. 24 receiving TDs versus 2 rushing TDs at the wide receiver spot. 53 different wide receivers have now made the top 10 list with Rice and Flowers. Hill still leads them all. Number 1 last week, Ridley not on the wide receiver list. That's happened 6 times. They're even 6 and 6 for number 1 repeating on the top 10. And for minimum 5 catches, we talked about this at the beginning of the episode. Jalen Hyatt leads all receivers this week with 21.8 yards per reception. That gets you statted up in the wide receiver room. Oh, And that allows us to start getting into next week's games. First, I got to ask you, what stood out on the list, Adam?
Not a whole lot was surprising about the list to me this week. I mean, you mentioned with the whole Zay Flowers thing, but let's be honest, on that rushing touchdown that he had at the end of the game, if he made the right play and just took a knee at the 1 yard line like he was supposed
Yeah.
to, he wouldn't be
Mhm.
on that top 10 list, and like he
This is very
didn't
true.
do a whole lot that game. He had the one receiving touchdown earlier, but that like late rushing touchdown was a little bit misleading because he wasn't supposed to score, and you can make the case that maybe the Chargers kind of let him score to keep themselves in the game. But besides that, again, like the top 10 list, look, Evans is there, Keenan's there, Tyreek is there. They're there every single week. Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot of surprises with how that list looked this week.
Again, kind of talking about Keenan Allen, I still kind of blows my mind. 3 weeks over 100 yards, 3 weeks with double-digit receptions, not just targets. 3 weeks with double-digit receptions. That just is really crazy to me. And there was one other one on there as well about 14 wide receivers had double-digit targets, but only 3 had double-digit receptions. We talk about all the drops. You talk about the drops with Kansas City and stuff like that. 14 with double-digit targets. Only 3 actually were able to haul in double-digit catches. That's pretty crazy to me. All right, we got 15 minutes to get through this week's games, Adams. We are going to do it today. Seattle and Dallas are up on Thursday night. I love this for fantasy from a Dallas perspective. I think Dallas guys, you're going to play them all. Even Cooks, put Cooks in. He's cooking. Cook is cooking, and he's making the top 10 list. He's getting it. He's getting touchdowns every week. So and double-digit looks, etc. So I like Prescott, like we talked about. I'm gonna put Pollard in again this week. I'm gonna play Lamb, and I'll even flex in Cooks. As far as the Seattle side, you're going to play Geno, and you're probably gonna play Charbonnet because you picked him up on the waiver wire, and you don't want to feel silly not playing him. And with 6 teams on the bye this week, I can get away with a little more, but man, you're not going to like playing them against this Dallas defense. Good game
I
on
mean, I'm
Thursday.
not playing Geno. For me, I'm fading Geno all the way. I have no interest in
Yeah.
playing Geno this week. I agree with you on Charbonnet. You know, you're starting him and hoping he gets like 10 points, right? Like he's that
Mm-hmm.
kind of player, you know what I mean? Like I don't think he has a ton of ceiling this week, but he should have a decently safe floor as long as, Walker's still out and all that and he gets, a similar workload like last week. They showed late in the game against the Niners that Geno's going to check it down to him a lot when they're playing behind, so that could help his value. For the Cowboys side, one guy you didn't mention, Jake Ferguson, having a sneaky
Oh
good
yeah.
season as a tight end. I'm playing Jake Ferguson this week if I have him. And
Yeah, I
Pollard,
like Ferguson.
watch out for Pollard down this last stretch. He's gotten a couple touchdowns now recently. He's starting to pick up his yards per carry recently. And like I said, they've kind of conserved Pollard for late in the season, being this is his first ever year as a featured running back. Time to turn him loose and let's see what he can do down the stretch.
Yeah, sorry, Ferguson tied in 12 on the season. Definitely should have brought him up. He's done well for me on a few
Quietly.
fantasy teams. Yeah.
Quietly.
In Indianapolis at Tennessee. Normally I would have said I believe I actually said I don't really like Henry. Maybe there, but he pulls in. He gets his 2 touchdowns. He less than 70 yards, but he gets his 2 touchdowns. Indianapolis, a game where you kind of see these two fighting it back and forth on the Indy side of the ball. You're loving what Campbell's doing right now, and Minshew's getting it done. Tay again makes the top 10 list this week. I know it's that Tennessee defense, but they've really kind of fallen off. I'm okay playing my Colts this week.
Yeah, I mean, I'll play the usual Colts, like your
Yeah.
JT and your Pittman. There's no one else I'm super excited about. I guess you're starting Henry on the other side, but, from a fantasy perspective, not exactly an exciting game.
I agree. But you can still feel safe playing your players. I mean, you have to play some people, especially with 6 teams on the bye. You're
Yeah.
going to have to play players that you might not play. You're going to have look at and be like, options are limited. I'm okay. I'm not going to feel as bad about having to put my Colts players in this week as I might have in previous weeks. Chargers, stat monsters, go to New England. I actually like the Chargers finally to win one. New England just absolute dumpster fire right now, not playing well. Ramonde has been playing well, so maybe Ramonde gets in. He's maybe the only New Englander I let in. You could pick a receiver maybe if you have to again because there's 6 teams on the bye. Obviously, you're playing Keenan Allen again. Herbert steady 5th in almost every category over the season. steadily making the top 10 list, on a regular basis. I'm playing my Chargers and maybe Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that. I mean, I'm not playing any of the other Chargers receivers after Keenan Allen. Again, not a super exciting game from a fantasy perspective, but for the Patriots, what they proved last week against the Giants is they're even better at losing than most teams. Okay, like the Patriots were so good at winning for so long. Let's give Bill some credit. At least he's losing the right way.
Mm-hmm. He is. They're going to end up with a nice draft pick, and they might be back. I don't know if Belichick will be back though. Detroit at New Orleans. Probably should have brought Belichick up on that coaching spot we did. Detroit at New Orleans. Love this one. Play them all. Kamara. I like Kamara to get back on the top 10 list this week. Olave getting the reception, just haven't gotten the end zone. I think he'll find the end zone this week. Obviously, Detroit is a fantasy. You want to play them all. You can play Gibbs and Monty in this one. Obviously, you're going to play golf. Obviously, you're going to play St. Raw. It's in a dome, which is where Detroit likes to play. Love this one for fantasy points.
Oh, yeah, this could be that high-scoring game. You kind of want to start a lot of guys, especially considering, like you brought up a few times, with 6 teams on the bye. This is a good game to target. If you're a DFS player, this is a good DFS target game as well. I think it's high-scoring. The Lions' defense has struggled a lot more recently. In the beginning of the year, their defense was looking really good. They have not been as good lately as they were earlier in the year. Same thing can probably be said about the Saints as well. I think that this is a game that could definitely be a shootout.
Who are you guys playing this week? Let us know in the comments below. We'll put it on screen. I want to know who's looking good. Or if you got any questions, now's the time to ask them. You got NFL writer Adam Hulse here, NFL writer Sports Kita. This is literally what he does all week. The minute we finish the show, he says, hey, thanks for having me. He hops off and he starts writing articles for you guys to win all week long. So ask your questions if you have them now. Atlanta at New York. Okay, here we go. Bijan's been playing well. New York they're getting wore down on defense. You're able to get a little more points on them. I do like Garrett Wilson. I know you don't believe in it that much, but Garrett Wilson is getting low double digits, but he's getting those double digit points. And again, 6 weeks on the bye. I don't feel as bad playing Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson might be the only play in this game. I don't know. You're probably going to play Bijan because you have to. Drake London's nice. He'll get you double digits maybe on receptions and stuff. I don't know if we'll find the end zone, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of game I have really not much interest at all from a fantasy perspective. Both of these passing defenses are actually pretty good. The Jets much better against the pass than they are against the run. So, maybe Bijan has kind of a pop week. But I see this as a very low-scoring game. Probably like a 16-13, type of game. I don't think there's a whole lot of points to go around in this one.
No, there's definitely not going to be points. Again, it's going to be your reception stat, your PPR stats, if you get anything out of that one. Arizona at Pittsburgh. There's the schedule again. I love it. Kyler Murray's heating up, and but they have no run game. And against Pittsburgh, running's already tough. Pittsburgh might be able to do just enough. I like Pittsburgh in this one because it's in Pittsburgh. That's why I picked them in the preseason, if you will, to win this game. And that's why I kind of like them in this one. You're not going to get a lot of points. Murray might get you some points. And I don't know, maybe Pittsburgh's running game is picked up. Pittsburgh's running picked up big, but which one do you pick? Do you pick Warren? Do you pick Najee? It's the new offensive mind, I think, which is why Najee got more rush yards in this one now that Canada's not there. So that trend could pick up. You're not going to get huge fantasy points out of this one, but you can get away with a couple with the 6 teams on the bye.
Look, I mean, the way I feel about the Steelers this week is the same thing I said a lot during our preseason preview episodes, in that they generally take care of business at home against mediocre to bad teams. That's been a trend for the Steelers for a lot of years. I expect them to do the same here. I'm definitely starting Kyler Murray if I have him. Again, he's one of those under-the-radar guys that finishes as a QB1 like almost every week. Maybe back-end QB1, but he keeps doing it, and his legs give him upside for sure with that rushing, especially the touchdowns. He always finds his way into the end zone as a rusher. He gets a lot of rushing touchdowns, which is good for Murray. And look, like you hit on it with the Steelers rushing game, right? Like a couple of weeks ago, like me saying this would have been an absolutely outlandish, ridiculous statement. But like, I'm okay starting Najee and Jalen Warren. Like if you have either one of them, they both make for pretty, I don't want to start both of them in the same lineup. If you have them both on the same roster, I don't know what you're doing with your roster construction, but both of them make for pretty decent options this week with all the bye weeks against a team like the Cardinals, they're probably going to run the ball more. Najee Harris has quietly looked pretty good lately, too. He's kind of bouncing back as well. Strangely enough, both Steelers running backs, pretty decent options.
There you go. Miami at Washington. You're looking for a game that, okay, I need to sit my Miami players. Well, this one isn't it. We saw the shootout last week. You're going to play Tua. You're going to play Mustard. You're going to play Hill, who keeps finishing in the top 5, most top 10 appearances, and all his top 10 appearances are actually top 5 appearances over the fantasy season. I'm good playing Waddle again. He's getting his catches. He's getting his yards. Still waiting to find the end zone. I actually think he might find the end zone this week. I like Waddle for an end zone visit this week. Washington, of course, Sam Howell leading the entire NFL in completions and yardage. This is another game. It's going to be a shootout. Look for Howell to get big yards again. I don't know who's coming along with him. Maybe Adam knows.
Look, I mean, I'm with you. Like we said about, the Detroit-New Orleans game, that was a good one to target for fantasy. This one's probably even better to target for fantasy. I see this as a high-scoring game. Definitely, like, if you're still feeling reluctant about putting Sam Howell into your fantasy lineups at this point, like, you're just a hater. You know what I mean?
Like flexing the hell out of him. I'm telling you right now.
He's look like super flex without a doubt, but even in 1 QB leagues, Sam Howell needs to be in your lineup.
You can play him.
He finishes in the top 10 every single week.
5 weeks in a row, kids.
And now, especially this week, with 6 quarterbacks on a bye, and against a Dolphins team that we know is going to score points, so Howell's going to have to pass a lot to keep up with that. Sam Howell might be having a top 5 QB performance this week.
Absolutely. I like Brian Robinson coming in too, because he catches all those balls. They love to throw him the ball. This is going to be a passing game. I actually going to say, especially in DFS, maybe look at Brian Robinson for a nice value pick in this one. Denver at Houston, another one that should be pretty nice for fantasy. Now, Denver's pass defense is really, slapped down. And here's the thing. They're knocking down the wide receiver ones. They held, I wish I had, if you watch Wake Up with TSS Fantasy every Sunday morning. Watch Wake Up TSS Fantasy every Sunday morning. I do a segment on there. The whole show is great. This isn't about me. The whole show is great, but I do a segment called the Dingus Picks of the Week. And because I'm Chris Fox. Ding, ding, ding. All right. And on that, I talked about Denver's pass defense shutting down wide receiver ones. They have absolutely single-digited wide receiver ones. They even held Tyreek Hill to 12 points. They held Keenan Allen to 9.5. They held A.J. Brown to 1.8 fantasy points. They are shutting wide receiver ones down. Now, the interesting thing here in this one is who is the wide receiver one in Houston? Is it Tank Dell or is it Nico Collins? One of them's getting shut down. You got to figure out which one the other one is, and you might get some points there because C.J. Stroud is blowing things up. Denver on the other side, they're not giving anybody fantasy points except Sutton. I'm okay playing Sutton this week, but as for fantasy points, I don't like Denver at all.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that stat you were just throwing out, it just shows how good Pat Surtain is, right? Like, he is a top-level elite cornerback that gets recognition, but probably not enough recognition for how good he's been, not just this year, but like his entire time in the NFL. He's been absolutely unbelievable. I love this matchup. Maybe not as much from a fantasy perspective, but from an NFL standpoint, I absolutely love the Texans and the Broncos meeting right now, with the Broncos on their roll, with the Texans right on the verge of, look, like this is a must-win game for the Texans. Like after losing to the Jags last week,
both of them.
It is. Like for both teams, like they got to win this one. And this is like one of those games that, when the season's over and you look back at who made it into the wild card spots, this game can be absolutely pivotal, not just for records, but for tiebreakers, for head-to-head stuff. This is a great game at the perfect time of the season.
It's fantastic. It's going to be one of the highlights of the NFL slate when you talk about an actual great game on both sides of the ball. Miami and Washington are also going to be fun to watch, but this one has the most meaning. This is going to be a big one. Then we get the afternoon games. Carolina at Tampa Bay. Whatever. Carolina, you can play Chuba Hubbard if you want. Tampa Bay. You're good with Baker. You throw Rachaad White in because 6 teams are on the bye, and so you probably have to play him this week. And he did actually get 100 rush yards last week. He's hit the top 10 a couple times in the last couple weeks. He may do it again. And, of course, Mike Evans is balling out right now. Carolina had been shutting down wide receivers a little bit, so maybe a little regression here, but they're also fading out. Again, it's a 6-team bye week this week. You lost Buffalo. You lost you lost Fields out of Chicago. You lost Minnesota. So, there's going to be room to play some guys, I guess, in this one. I don't like it, but
Yeah, I mean, Evans is obviously starting every week with how good he's been this year and every year, let's be honest. Rachaad White is a guy I definitely like this week. The Panthers have severely struggled against the run, and Rachaad White's hot right now. He's definitely on a roll right now against an awful rushing defense. I like Rachaad White a lot as an upside play. And when it comes to the Panthers, I mean, I guess you're still starting Thielen, even though he's fallen off a lot since his hot start to the season. The Buccaneers passing defense isn't very good. And if the Bucs take care of business, the Panthers should at least be playing from behind for most of the game. So I'd reluctantly still start Thielen. Not super excited about it. And then again, on the Bucs side, it's for me, Rachaad and Evans, and that's about it.
16 bye weeks. You got to play Thielen. Cleveland at Los Angeles. Cleveland has had bad games. You got to be careful here, right? Because Los Angeles is very hot. We saw what Kyren did. We're looking for Puka to come through and have another big game. Stafford playing extremely well after his 4 touchdowns last week. They come against a Cleveland team that got a little beat up. Cleveland has had bad games this year. You got to be careful. They've never had 2 in a row. Cleveland has not had 2 bad games on defense in a row. So this could be a trap game. This could be one of the ones where you think LA is going to ball out, but Cleveland might step up after getting embarrassed last week. This one scares me just a little bit. Obviously, I'm playing Kyren, though, and I'll probably play Stafford, too.
Yeah, I mean, this, talk about must-win games. I mean, this is another one that, the Browns need to win this game to really stay in that playoff picture, right?
Yep.
And against a team like the Rams, that's not a great team, not a terrible team. They're kind of a middle-of-the-road type of team. These are the kind of games that the Browns need to win down the stretch if they want to make it into that playoffs with so many teams competing for those spots. So very important game for the Browns. And even for the Rams, I mean, they can still steal that the 7 seed in the NFC. But, I mean, you said it, Kyren Williams, after what he just did last week, he absolutely has to start. I'm not thrilled about him or really anybody because the Browns' defense still has been very good, though their offense has been pretty pitiful in a lot of games this year. Their defense has at least showed up in most games this year. So not super great fantasy options from this game, but I guess you play the running backs.
I guess. I'm going to let you go first on this one. This is the afternoon game that you will be watching, all of you. Every single one of you will be watching this game. San Francisco at Philadelphia. You're going to get everything you wanted. And just like Buffalo, Philadelphia last week, play everybody in this one. Play all your 49ers, play all your Eagles. I know the 49ers have a little bit better defense. I don't care. This is where big players come up and make big plays. Adam, San Francisco at Philly.
I mean, you hit it on the head. You're playing everybody from this game. Now, normally I like fading running backs against the Eagles because their rush defense is absolutely excellent. But you're obviously not benching Christian McCaffrey, right? So the only thing I'll say about McCaffrey is he's not the guy I'm building a DFS lineup around this week. I'm not paying up for McCaffrey in DFS against a very good Eagles rushing defense, though McCaffrey's still going to get his, right? But if I'm going to spend up for one of the top priced players, I think that there's better options than Christian McCaffrey this week. But as for the passing games, both teams give up a lot of passing yards. So all the receivers should be able to eat. George Kittle could have a very big game. The Eagles have not been good at covering tight ends this year. So this could be another one of those pop weeks for George Kittle. Game of the week, easily by far from an NFL perspective. It might be game of the week from a fantasy perspective as well.
Look, CMC has 40 more carries than anybody else. He's got 150 more rush yards than anybody else. He's got over 200 more receiving yards than anybody else. It's ugly, and it's Christian McCaffrey, and there you go. You're definitely going to play him. this week. Kansas City at Green Bay gets the night game. I'm not mad at this one because Jordan Love has really turned it on. 3 touchdowns last week. Patty Mahomes always right there. Kansas City at Green Bay is going to be cold. Kansas City struggling a little bit, but able to come off with the wins. And in this cold weather, I expect fantasy points galore in this one too. Although, be careful with your Green Bay receivers. Kansas City Snead is absolutely shutting people down as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd be careful with the receivers on both sides. Both of these pass defenses are pretty good, and neither of these receiving cores have really been reliable in fantasy football. They've been, kind of sporadic. Now, I absolutely love Pacheco in this game. Pacheco is one of my favorite players this entire week to target. DFS, get him in there. You're obviously starting him in weekly leagues. Pacheco's a guy I think could really go off this week. The Packers struggle to stop the run. The Chiefs have been committed to getting Pacheco his touches. I think we could see a big game.
Yeah, I like Love in this one, fantasy-wise. Obviously, I like Pacheco. You're not going to not play Patty Mahomes. And those are really the guys. You don't know which wide receiver is really going to get it. I don't like Watson in this one, though. Again, Snead really shutting people down. So go somewhere else. Look for a Doubs or something in this one. Kansas City at Green Bay on Sunday night. And the last game of the week, Monday night, Cincinnati at Jacksonville. Assuredly more exciting than this week's Chicago-Minnesota matchup. I don't know if this is going to be like super, oh my gosh, it's a great game. But, you'll be able to watch it and you won't fall asleep like last night. I like Jacksonville a little bit in this one, but I don't expect to see the same number. Cincinnati's defense, not horrible. They show up a lot of times and stifle your fantasy points. So be careful here. I don't know if Ridley's going to show up. I don't know if Kirk and Lawrence are going to be the guys. ETN is kind of nice maybe. Jamar Chase obviously hindered without Burrow there. This one, it's a 6-team bye week, so you're probably going to have players in this one. But you talk about Monday Night Miracles, that's what it's going to be in this one. It's going to be a miracle.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Don't love this game from a fantasy perspective because both the Jaguars and the Bengals have much better defenses than people usually give them credit for. These are two sneaky, good, solid defenses that get the job done when they have to. But for me, this game, it's just so disappointing that we don't have Joe Burrow. Because how great of a Monday Night Football, Trevor versus Joe Burrow. And even from this week as a whole, right, we could have potentially saw Eagles versus Niners and Bengals versus Jags, which if Burrow was still there, potentially 2 conference championship previews, right? The Jags and the Bengals could have been 2 teams competing for that spot. They surely were in the mix before the season started to be mentioned among those conversations. And, the Eagles and Niners are who we thought they were before the year started, right? They were supposed to be dominant. They have been dominant. And if that ends up being the NFC Championship game, nobody would be surprised.
None at all. But, instead we get what we get, and we'll see how it happens. If you guys have any questions, now's the time to ask them. If you got anything to add, now is the time to send them in as we wrap this up. We got you guys all statted up in the quarterback room, running back, wide receiver room. Go back and check that out, or find us on Instagram. You'll get to see all those stats put up there as well. I got to make a mention for Wake Up Fantasy, live Sunday mornings on the Fantasy Sports Corporation channel. These guys run through your morning. We've got little segments in there for you. The Dingus Do Not Plays of the Week, Dingus Picks of the Week for Do Not Plays are on there as well. You want to check that out tonight on the Fantasy Sports Corporation. We got the Waiver Wire, TSS Fantasy Waiver Wire show. You'll get to see who to pick up and who not to pick up. We talked about Toilets to Titles. Go check them out, toiletstotitles.com. Go over to the Gilded app. Join those chat rooms. You get in with NFL analysts, draft day strategists, waiver wire pickups, everything. That Gilda app will put you one-on-one with people from toiletstotitles.com. And of course, we have to mention the Adam Hulse, NFL writer at sportskita.com. Go over to sportskita/Adam Hulse. You'll find all his great stuff, cranking out articles, like lots and lots of articles that will help you win every week. And he joins us every week on the show, sportskita.com with Adam Hulse, to help you win all your fantasy matchups. We want to thank everybody who joined the show. We had Adam on the show today. We had Jerry. We had Josh from Fourth and Flex. Go check out Fourth and Flex. check out Vandy and Trey over there. Those guys are absolutely amazing and a lot of fun too. We had David Zenis, I always say his name wrong, doing card breaks over at Genesis Card Breaks on Facebook. Thanks for stopping in, David. And everybody else has stopped in, even if you just watched and say anything. We appreciate you coming in. Adam, we are only 10 minutes over today. That's fantastic. That's such a big improvement. So much to talk about. And the thing is just we love talking about it, so it's hard to stay in that 1.5 hour window.
10 minutes over, so we had overtime. That's all. It's just a quick little NFL overtime. Like that's all it is.
Hey, Houston did it. They didn't come out on top. I think we played the Jacksonville side and won this one for sure. Adam, thanks for joining us as always every single week. So glad to have you. So glad to have you guys. Come check us out over on Instagram at that EFIN show. We're over on Twitter as well. We always air on the Fantasy Sports Corporation channel. And if you want to see how me and Adam pick every single game for every single team this year, you can go to that EFIN Sports Show channel. Again, both of us just destroying right now. I'm 114.66. Adam's 115.64. Have a great weekend. Everybody safe. Be safe. Enjoy your football. Best of luck in your fantasy matchups. You better win because playoffs are around the corner. On behalf of Adam Hulse, I am the Chris Fox. We'll see you guys next week.